Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Latina Leadership Series. My name is Angelica Casares, and I am your host. So, on this episode, I talked to Carol. Carol, on this episode, I talked to her about leadership, actual leadership training within the corporate space. She had a lot to say, but there are some little things that I want you, and I said this the last episode, where I want you to pick up on. There's something she says that just resonated with me very well, which was, in terms of small terms, was, it's all about not adaptability, not all these other things that we assume what leadership is, but leadership actually means taking responsibility. The responsibility of, you know what, I'm already giving you what the interview is about. I want you to listen to it. I want you to hear it out. But when she talks about that very small space, that very small window of space, when she mentions that, I want you to pick up on it because it was very insightful for me in that moment. And I think it can resonate with you. So, hope you enjoy this episode and please listen. Oh, before I go, I want you to know that all the episodes, all the entire Latina Leadership Series is actually sponsored by my friends at Walmart. Please go tell them, hey, this was an amazing, series or something, or just tell them, hey, down below, say, hey, Walmart, thanks so much. And yeah, I greatly appreciate that. And them as my sponsor, I'm sure they would greatly appreciate that also. So, yeah. All right. Enjoy the episode. On this episode, I am bringing on a very, very Carolyn. I want to call you my friend, but I don't know if I'm jumping that hurdle because I've never said, "Hey, Carolyn, you're my friend." I don't know how this works. We recently met at the She podcast, and Carolyn, I thought you were a very interesting person. You were a very quiet and shy person, and I want to get to know people in those aspects. I knew you had a story. I knew you had something to say. But on today's episode, we're gonna turn it just a little bit. We're have a different kind of conversation on here. But what I do want to do is, if I would like you to share as much as you are comfortable sharing as to who you are, what you do, and then from there we'll jump into the conversation.
All right, sounds great. So, yeah, thank you so much, Angelica, for inviting me on your podcast. Again, as you said, my name is Carolyn Kiel, and I work my full-time job. I live in New Jersey, and I work at a large telecommunications company in the learning and development department, where I work on training design for some of our new products and promotions that come out. I've been doing that for almost 5 years, and before that had another position in training at the same company. And in my quote unquote free time, I'm also a podcaster, which is how we met at She Podcasts. I host a show called Beyond 6 Seconds, where I interview people about some of the big challenges they've been through and how it's shaped their lives and identities and their own personal stories. So I enjoy getting to know people and their strengths and talents and interests through the show as well. And other than that, I've been working in sort of the talent / learning and development leadership area for about 9 years, coming on 9 years now in the corporate world.
Oh, wow.
And before that, I was doing change management and project management work all in the corporate world for a couple of years before that. And so that's sort of the quick rundown of me and my career.
Well, thank you again, Carolyn, for taking the opportunity at the time of your day. I know you're a busy person to come on here and be part of the podcast. How long have you been podcasting for?
In January, and coming up in a few months, it will be 4 years, which is amazing. It seems like it went very quickly, but yeah, it's going to be 4 years.
What episode are you on at this point after 4 years of podcasting?
See, I just released episode 138. So I've been flexing my release calendar. So right now, and for most of the time I've been podcasting, I've been doing every other Monday. It's just managing a full-time career and life. And because you podcast host as well. It's a lot, but that's kind of what I can handle. But yeah, it's still a lot of episodes. It's a lot of conversations.
It sounds like a lot. So I have a question. What would you say has been your most interesting conversation? You don't have to give the details as to which one it was. We want people, definitely those listeners, to go in and actually listen to her Beyond 6 Seconds. It's an amazing podcast. I've listened to a few episodes myself. But which one has been the most interesting for you?
Oh my gosh, it's really hard to pick one of all of those. But
which is the one you remember?
One I remember. Well, there's one that I released recently of a woman who talked about she was diagnosed as a teenager at age 13 with a rare type of cancer. And she talks about, going through that challenge of recovery. And for her, a lot of the challenges around sort of her mental and emotional health were in some ways more challenging, or at least as challenging as the whole medical part of getting well physically. So she, went on to grow up and have a career in nonprofit and fundraising. So yeah, she wound up quitting her full-time job after having this career in nonprofits, and she really wanted to start her passion project, which was around creating a startup online community to support cancer patients, survivors and thrivers, their friends and family, and just provide a place for people to be open and honest, and sort of a safe space to get support and resources as they went through their own cancer journeys. So it was one thing that I really realized about that is she talked a lot about feeling like alone when she was going through the struggle on her own, and she didn't want other people to feel that way. And it's a
Mm.
common theme I hear from a lot of my guests who are talking about being the only person who is either in this particular position or going through this particular challenge. And they either find the community that they're looking for, or a lot of times they create the community that they need, and help other people feel less alone as well.
We do. We hear a lot of the conversation about knowing how to get to know yourself.
Mhm.
So when I went through my experience, I was like, I already spend a lot of time alone.
Yeah.
It's a lonely place to be alone. Like, I know myself. At least I like to think I know myself. And so when I hear people give that suggestion as to like, go look for yourself, go find yourself, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I did, I
That's great.
did,
Yeah. No,
I
that's
did, and
wonderful.
so yeah, and so that theme that you said that you talk about, that you hear about people not wanting to be alone, I can see why. I can see why. Well, like as I said, I've listened to a few episodes. I'm excited. You have a lot. You have a lot catalogs, and I'm like, okay, I have. There's more that I need to go through. Um,
Appreciate
so
it.
that has been your most memorable, which has been the last one. Before we move on, one more thing about podcasting. What have you
Yeah.
learned yourself?
Gosh, for me, one of one of the many reasons that I started podcasting almost 4 years ago is that I really had an interest and a passion to learn more about people. But as you mentioned at the top of the show, I am relatively quiet and shy. So it's not a natural thing for me to just like walk up and approach people and like ask them to bear their deepest stories and tell me. But there's something about having a podcast that's like, it gives me this venue to be like, I have this platform. I think that you have an interesting story, and would you like to come on? And part of me just wanted to do it to practice having these like one-on-one conversations and practice my interviewing skills and my listening skills, and can I help people tell a story? And I was really amazed at how many people, especially in the beginning, said yes, that they would be more than happy to be on this like brand new podcast that had started 4 years ago. So for me, I've just been excited. I've gotten good feedback on the stories that I've helped lead people through in the interviews, and I really try to ask open-ended and good and probing questions that make people feel comfortable enough to open up and kind of guide them through their stories. So it's been a great practice for me as an interviewer, and as just being able to make those one-on-one connections. It's been really great.
Yeah. Well, I've listened, like I said, I've listened, and yeah, they are very interesting conversations. It's amazing how people like talking, people like, and then especially about the things that they're passionate about. And I love hearing about them myself also. So when I invited you on here, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get her to talk to me about herself. And because you
You
have
know,
such
it's
an
funny.
interesting,
Yeah,
go
it's
ahead.
funny. It's much easier for me to get people like to talk about themselves than for me to talk about myself. That actually is something this coming year on my show, I'm really challenging myself to like, I have to share a little bit more about my own, personal story on my own show. So I'm committed to that next
Well,
year.
I have to say this. I have to say for the listeners that we sat down for lunch, and we had like a conversation, and it. Carolyn, I really, really appreciated that moment, because it you talked about earlier about taking the time and the opportunity to listen, right? Taking the opportunity to listen. I'm so used to people being just like me, where we stumbled over each other and we talk over each other. I'm so used to that it was it for a moment I was like, okay, I have to stop. I have to stop and listen. And my thing for the rest of for a lifetime is to get to know people, shy people, and not just look for like the extroverts like myself, and look for people who are just like me. Um, so I thank you for opening up that, for inviting me in and having trusting me enough to be a friend at least.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I really appreciated our conversation. It was great to just spend some time one on one and sit down and just take that time where you're not rushed and you're not,
Yeah,
like trying to have like a goal for the meeting, just to get to know you. So I
yeah,
appreciate that too.
yeah, yeah. I appreciated you too. I appreciated that. So on this episode, one of the conversations during that sit down that we had, you started a conversation that I took very much interest in. I
Mm.
was telling you what I was doing, and I was telling you about some of the findings that I had when I was working on the Latina leadership series, and I was looking for data because again, when I talk about a topic, I like to know that at least I know what I'm talking about. And well, you have to like educate yourself a little bit, and there wasn't a lot of educating for myself to be out there when I was um, talking about the things that Latinas in leadership. First of all, that whole topic, Latinas in leadership, isn't really a topic. I don't know if it's not of interest or if it's not something that people really take. Uh, if it's so specific and so niche that people are like, well, maybe, right? We talk about women in leadership, but then Latina in leadership. But so during that conversation, we started talking about what it takes for diversity and inclusion in corporate, because you mentioned that you worked for the company that you work for, and so you had some interesting tells. Can we dive deep into that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'd
Okay.
love to.
So first of all, what are your findings since you're on the development side? What are some of those findings that you find, and in terms
So,
of like diversity and inclusion?
gosh, well, I haven't been necessarily like focused exclusively on diversity inclusion initiatives in my
Hmm.
company, but I
Hmm.
have held roles in employee resource groups and leadership positions, and worked very closely with our diversity and inclusion teams over the years. Um, for me, oh gosh, there's just so many different layers to it. I mean, one is around the culture of the company.
Hmm.
So I think there are a lot of initiatives that try to bring people in and kind of make them, there's the whole pipeline. So there are certain initiatives that focus on like the recruitment, like bringing people in who, are different and will make a company more diverse, from their employee population. But
Hmm.
I think a lot of times where some companies kind of get challenged is, well, what happens when people are there? So it's one thing to recruit and look in the places where people are naturally, and go out to them and bring them in and kind of sell them into how great, and what great employer that you're working with. But then, what do you do once people are there? Are you creating a culture that's, not just welcoming, but that is truly inclusive, that truly listens to people's ideas when they raise them, that doesn't just sort of have, a predisposed way of operating.
Hmm.
So it's literally sometimes, sometimes an organization or people within it, or managers of such, will say that they want, like, different ideas, or they want people to raise their voice and share different, just different ideas and concepts, say from an innovation point of view. But sometimes, and again, it might depend on the particular team you're on or the particular managers that you're working with. Once you're in the company, it's not always open, where,
Yeah.
not those ideas may not always be received with open arms, as much as,
Yeah.
as it may have been sort of sold at the opening. And
Yeah.
it sounds simple. That's just one example, but it's important to kind of build those structures, and a lot of it is around, training all levels of management to really, uphold these different directives, and different ideas around how do you create an environment where people really feel free to share their ideas and really feel a sense of belonging, and really I hate to say it's so cliche that the phrase "bring your full self to work," and while that's not, I don't know that that's entirely possible for every single person, but at least have people feel comfortable enough where they can fully feel like they're contributing and using their strengths to advance and enrich the workplace.
So I don't want to focus on too much on like what doesn't work, but in your experience, in the training that you've done, development that you've done in the past, what does work?
For me, some of the training that I've done around leadership development at a previous company is around, really focusing on, as I was saying before, all levels of management need
Yeah.
some sort of, either coaching or structure, or just like, getting behind the overall strategy of the company. Say if it's a strategy around, bringing in more, diverse employee base to help, work with different populations, or relate more to different customer groups, or just bring new and different ideas and experiences into the company. So for me, I've worked on programs where we've helped sort of middle management supervisors and such just have more open conversations with their direct reports. And in some cases, it's been as proscriptive as, writing up sort of little monthly, almost like little monthly workbooks for them that sort of say, here's a particular theme we're going to talk about this month. It could be like a theme of accountability, or sort of being mindful, like being here in the present moment, and helping these managers kind of relate through maybe telling a little bit about an example of where they, experienced where they stood up and took accountability for a challenge, and what that came up with, and then leading a discussion with their staff members about the importance of that. And I pick on accountability and mindfulness because those were sort of that was part of a larger culture initiative that we were working on. There were different principles. So, and it seems very simple, but, and again, it really depends on the company, but sometimes companies, there are certain parts, there are certain managers who maybe they're new, maybe they were recently promoted from an individual contributor sense that, maybe haven't had a lot of practice talking with the people who report to them, and getting those management skills. So I think that helps a lot. It doesn't always have to be as prescriptive as writing a workbook and then sort of reviewing with them on monthly calls about how did you do, and what questions did you have, what were your challenges, and kind of helping them through those conversations. But if you tailor it to the company, that is one thing that I found was pretty successful over the course of a year, which was several different conversations. We found that people were the managers were more comfortable talking with their employees about sort of non-strictly business and metrics types of things, and the employees were happier and a little more comfortable with their management, and raising new ideas and raising challenges, and working through issues and problems with them.
You said something. You mentioned accountability. This is the first time I hear somebody, and then within this podcast and myself, and I never considered that. When you say accountability, can you expand on that?
Sure. So yeah, that was that was actually a pretty key part of the
Really?
employee,
Okay.
or the culture that we were trying to bring. So, and again, it depends on the company that you're working with. Every company has its own unique challenges based on its background and how it's evolved. But accountability is really about sort of, again, to use another cliche, like the buck stops here or whatever. It's like literally you are, who is the person who is ultimately, going to take I'll say like the full responsibility for something if, if it goes right or doesn't happen the way it does, or if it does happen. So there may be people who are like responsible, I guess, to who are doing the work, if it's like leading a project, or working on a process. But accountability, a lot of times, as a manager, you may have accountability for a project succeeding or failing, even if you're not hands-on in the project, because you as the leader your role is to help other people execute by being a support for them, by removing obstacles that they may encounter for the project, or by coaching and guiding them to do their best work. So it's something that comes up a lot when in management and leadership conversations. And of course, individual contributor employees have their own accountability as well. But a lot of times it's shared with the managers too.
I don't know why there was just a flash of like realization at this very moment. I'm like, oh, the true leadership is there, right? That cliche, the step box, the buck stops here. Like
Mhm,
the innuendo, like it's somebody else's problem. Oh, that's the way things are, or let somebody else deal with it. Is
mhm,
so like, it's like you just pass on the problem to somebody. Somebody
mhm,
inherently inherits the problem and they don't want to deal with it, so they put it,
mhm.
in the back file. They put it on the back burner. It's not really a responsibility they want to task on, or they want to have, or do they really want to make the change because they're not really trying to, I don't make a change. They're just trying to go to work,
Yeah.
basically, right?
And that
But
that is a challenge. Yeah, that is a challenge around just getting people to think differently and be innovative because a lot of times, people are busy and we don't always like to hear that, something like it just isn't my job, it's not in my focus. And,
yeah.
while everything may not legitimately be your job, but we do want to encourage people to think if they see a problem, maybe it's not on them to solve it necessarily, but they
Mhm.
should ideally be empowered to ask questions about it or learn more about it, or maybe even find or help bring together some of the people who might be able to come up with a solution.
I was having a conversation with my husband on this, on his podcast, or our podcast on Juana Words.
Mhm.
We were having a conversation, and I was telling him that there should be an initiative to like have incentives to those who are in higher ups, like higher management, whatever that looks like, C suites, corporate managers, community, like all of them, everybody who's in that space. There should be incentives to like really make it part of their responsibility, part of their job, to mentor, to see that, to, I don't, 20% of your job is like pulling employees aside and being like, hey, how are you doing? How is this job, and how can it be easier for you? Because once it becomes easier for you, then it becomes easier for me, because we're not dealing with, 40% of our job isn't fighting with each other. There's an understanding that you're getting somewhere and I'm getting somewhere. So can we touch a little bit on that? Like, what actually happens when a company actually successfully diversifies like their employees, and actually gives employees access to feeling like they're part of the actual team? Have you seen that? And does it actually like make a difference?
I mean, I think it's really powerful when you have a team of people who feel that they have the power to use their strengths and that they also at the same time feel supported by the team.
Hmm.
So that means that they're working to really bring the best of themselves, what they're passionate about, what they're really good at, and even some things that maybe they want to develop, but skills or areas of interest that they have that maybe they're not experts at yet, but they're motivated to learn more about it.
Hmm.
To really have that, as well as while at the same time being supported by their manager. So what does that mean? So that means that they feel comfortable bringing up challenges and issues and problems with the manager, that they don't always feel like they have to hide it or necessarily smooth things over and hide problems and things like that, and that they feel like the manager and even the rest of the team will have their back if there's a challenge, or they hit a hard spot if they're working on a project or having a conflict with another team member. And I think the role of a really good manager as a leader is someone who's, in my opinion, less directive in terms of, you as the leader don't have to necessarily know every single thing, that like, you don't have to necessarily know what every single person on your team has to do, in terms of telling them specifically what to do. Ideally,
Hmm.
you should be able to understand, who's really good at this, who's really passionate about that, and how do I explain what the goal is of the project and where we are, where we're trying to go, why we're trying to go there, and then sort of work with people to say, all right, how would you approach this problem? And be open to hearing ideas, being a good coach as well as a good mentor and a good sounding board to help people really work through those ideas if they get stuck, or if they really just need a different perspective, or maybe they're kind of going down the wrong path. You can kind of bring them back and kind of help them refocus and think through different areas and different challenges with that. So I think if you have a diverse team, you've got people with different perspectives and different strengths, and I think it overall makes it makes a powerful team, one in the execution, because you have that wide area of strengths, a wide variety of that. And two, it helps people see, because we all have our internal, um, I don't want to say some are our biases or like blind spots, like things that we don't see because we don't, we have our perspective. But if you have a bunch of people with a variety of different perspectives, you'll catch each other's blind spots, or you'll bring up ideas that maybe somebody else wasn't aware of. And I think overall it provides a better, if you're working on a customer facing product, it will help with a better customer experience as well, because you'll be able to relate and design something that is relatable to a much wider variety of people, because you've got all of those different perspectives and experiences brought into the development.
Yeah, so not only are you solving solutions in like indoors, but you're solving solutions to the customer you're trying to serve.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of corporate companies, they're trying to find solutions to somebody somewhere, and being diversifying it for me, it just makes the natural sense.
Mm-hmm.
It should come naturally. Um, but let's murk the waters a little bit here.
Yeah.
What doesn't work? What doesn't work when it comes to development? What doesn't work when it comes to leaders learning?
Leadership is so complex, because I a couple of years ago, I went back to grad school part-time to get a master's degree in organizational development. And there's a lot of leadership coursework in there. And it's where I started to realize that leadership is really difficult, because there's no one correct way to be a leader correctly, because a lot of times it depends on the context you're in, or the particular, the groups of people that you're working with, the type of role that you're in and that they're in. So yeah, in terms of what doesn't work, I think in most cases, it really doesn't work to be very directive. That was sort of the old, sort of top down, I'd say military style hierarchy. I don't even know if the military is, I think they're even less. I think even they've opened up with their leadership skills and are even like a bit more of coaching at this point in time. But I'm thinking
Yeah.
like back many decades, where a lot of times corporate roles was like, all right, I'm an employee, I'm going to sit here, and then my manager's going to give me work to do, and I'm just going to do the work, and then that's it. And I don't have to ask like a lot of questions. It's very routine. But now, as things have really changed in the workforce, with just globalization, having to work, and having so many companies are worldwide, are global now. So there's just so many different perspectives to pull in with that. There's a much quicker pace of business in terms of how quickly products need to get out the door. So there should be a lot more focus on sort of trying and failing fast, and just sort of iterating, as opposed to just sort of going away for a year, building something, and then pushing it out into the market and hoping that still works, because a lot of times the market's moved on, like market conditions have changed. So the world has just gotten much bigger and faster. And so I think it's really hard for managers now to, again, you're not going to know how to do everything, and so that you can tell people exactly what to do, because so much is unknown, so much is changing. So you really just, as a leader, need to be able to share, just sort of have an overall idea of what the goal is, and how it's being measured, and being able to communicate that clearly, and have people on your team who can turn that around into action, and then you can guide them along with that. So yeah, I think
Mm.
that's really where the world has moved at this point.
I can have this conversation. Like, I really, truly, I want to revisit this conversation. I really
Yeah.
want to revisit this, because you've given me a lot to think about. I don't even know. I think I have to go back to my blackboard and look at what I wrote, and access accountability. I'm like, accountability? That was my job. I thought the job of accountability was like on the person who was trying to move up. I never considered that there should be an accountability to those who are already there. I
Yeah.
never ever considered that. And you have given me a lot to think about. A
Oh,
lot. Thank you,
that's very
Carolyn. I mean, that was amazing. Um,
wonderful.
yeah, I'm thinking, I'm like, where am I? Because I'm already thinking like, what am I adding to what I'm doing? What am I doing? Right? I
Hmm.
thought I had my own responsibilities, but I have responsibilities to those who are trying to maybe do some of the same things that I'm trying to do. Right?
Hmm.
I never considered that. Considered it, but I've never like was like, it should be implemented. I should probably do that at some point. Now, I never, I never, ever, ever. Okay, Carolyn, you're. I'm so sorry to my listeners if you're hearing me go on this rant where I'm thinking to myself and you're hearing
This
me
is
push the
great.
thoughts out. I'm so sorry. I apologize.
Oh, this is great.
Um. So okay. I want okay, so I'm going to roll it back a little bit and I want to
Okay.
get to know you a little bit. Usually,
Okay.
I ask my guests a couple of few questions before I send them on their way.
Okay.
So one, have you, for those who are listening, you've heard me ask these questions, and I usually ask them in these moments because it triggers people. And so I'm going to ask you, Carolyn, have you ever been wrong? You don't have to tell me
Okay.
what was the moment. You don't have to tell me what it was. What did you learn from it, though?
Gosh. Well, I've definitely been wrong. Just the quick question of that. Um, for me, it's it's difficult in the moment because I know I've had like my injured pride and my defensiveness and all the things that come up and at the very moment that you realize that you're wrong and all of that. But as I get a little more time away from it, it's really helped me learn about in some cases my blind spots, or just a lot of ways sometimes just how to work in how to manage relationships within different companies, because again every company is different, and sometimes, at least I find, that some of the most challenging parts of working in really any kind of workplace, even if you're like a tiny little company with just a couple people or a large organization, is just understanding how to build and navigate relationships. So that's relationships with your peers, across departments, within your own team, as well as relationships with your direct manager or other, executives that you may interact with, because there's all different types of things to learn about. So I think a lot of the times that I've been tripped up, particularly early in my career, was just trying to understand how to how to interact and how to share, say, for example, appropriate levels of detail and information with different people, because with hot, it's different talking about a project with a higher level executive versus the people who are maybe like your technical team. There's just a different level of detail, there's different things that you focus on, and that's just something I had to learn through the workplace. And
Mhm.
I had some mentors and coaches trying to give me feedback, but a lot of it's trial and error. So it's being wrong is always a learning process, at least for me.
Yeah. So the reason I ask a lot of my guests this question is because they go immediately to the first thing that they know, and it we're talking about leadership, and I usually talk about leadership. When I ask what's wrong, their mind immediately goes to like, well, in my leadership, this is where I was wrong, or
Mhm.
this is how, and that's where I know where their mind is processing, where they're actually thinking about when was I a leader and when was I wrong when while I was a leader. Um, and you bring up mentorship.
Yeah.
How has mentorship actually helped you? As because
Yeah.
leadership and mentorship, I just goes hand in hand. How has mentorship helped you?
Yeah. Well, leadership and mentorship, yeah, absolutely should go hand in hand. And mentorship's been critical for my career overall. I wouldn't say that I've had too many like formal mentors, so I haven't necessarily been part of like a lot of defined mentorship programs where someone's
Mhm.
been assigned to me and I stay with them for a couple months. I know some companies will do that, particularly for new employees, but a lot of times I've tried to find my own mentors within a company. One of my mentors at a previous company was the one who encouraged me to go back to grad school part time, and
Mhm.
that kicked off a large career change that I made shortly after starting that grad school program.
Mhm.
Other mentors have been more informal. So I think what a lot of people, when they think of mentorship, think of that more formal, like I meet with this person once a month and we talk through goals. And yeah, that can be a mentor, but it can also be someone maybe that you just talk to, once or twice a year, or maybe just you meet them, you have some conversations for a month, and then you kind of go part ways. and it could even be someone that you've never met before. Someone can mentor you if you're reading articles written by someone, or you're following their leadership posts on social media. Maybe you've never met them or had a conversation with them one-on-one, but their content still inspires you and makes you think and helps craft your own leadership and the way that you work at your own company and craft your own career. So I think that mentorship is critical. But I have to say, and I'm kind of on a I was fascinated a couple of years ago to learn more about the difference between mentorship and
Mhm.
sponsorship within a company.
Okay.
And
Please.
I think a lot of people, especially the more, underrepresented groups of people, whether it's women or uh, people just from, just different minority groups who are entering the workplace, um, uh, there are a lot of pushes for mentorship, which is great and absolutely has an
Mhm.
importance, but sponsorship is really what's critical. And I feel like a lot of the groups are over mentored and
Thank
under
you.
sponsored.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, and that was critical for me in my most recent job that I made. I was doing all the right things. I was, everything that you need to do to get a job, like networking and having those informational interviews and understanding more about where I want to move with my career, and getting my skills up to date and just getting those experiences. But a big critical part, I believe, of me getting the current job I'm in was that I was working with another executive on my current team who thankfully was supportive of me moving on to advance my own career in the learning and development team. And I asked her, like, would you put in a good word for me with the directors on the other teams? So obviously that didn't single-handedly get me the role, but I don't think it hurt. So I think everybody needs that sponsorship where it's not necessarily someone that you have meetings with, that you have a tight personal relationship with, but it's someone who knows your work, who's comfortable being in, and who's high enough in the organization that they're in these conversations, these meetings that you're not in, where people are talking about who's going to get the next great assignment, who's going to get promoted, who's going to get this raise or this, things like that. And they need to be comfortable bringing up your name because they know your work and they want to talk about, how great you are and what you bring to the opportunity. And that's critical and that's tough
Yeah,
because
yeah.
not
Ask. That's a
everybody's going to
difficult
want to be
ask.
responsible. It is a big ask, but it's
Yeah.
critical. And yeah, I just think it's important.
Sometimes I think, and especially as women, we don't. We sit back and think, oh, they'll see my hard work. They'll put in a
Yeah,
good word. But how do they know? How would they know if you haven't said anything? So,
right.
like wanting to be sponsored or wanting to be, I guess, because it sounds more like wanting to be helped, right? You know
Mhm.
you're capable. You know your capabilities, and you know how much you can actually impact and do make a difference. So
Mhm.
why would you not? Instead of sitting back and being like, no, they'll see my hard work. They'll see what I can do. It's like,
Yeah.
but how do they know? How do they know? So can, for those who are listening, can you kind of define the differences between mentor and sponsor? Maybe they didn't pick up.
Let's see. So mentor, I would describe as someone who um, basically someone who is more of a coach or a guide. You could meet with them, they could give you information about something, or you could bring a problem or a challenge that you're having to them, with someone on a team, for example, and they can, you can kind of maybe even do a little bit of venting, and they can help you sort of work through a challenge, or they can give you feedback on work if you show them or present them with the situation. So they're sort of like those different guides who bring in their own experience, their own perspectives, just based on what they've done in their own careers. The sponsors aren't really the people you want to vent to. Those are the people who you want to have like the best impression possible. They should be familiar with your work. And while mentors could be at any level of the organization, they could be your peers, they could be, at your manager level. They could even be people who are, at a quote unquote lower position than you, or younger in the organization. So that mentor could be almost anyone.
Mhm.
Sponsor really should be someone who has some pull and some power in the organization. So you want someone who's in those meetings where they're making these important decisions, because it's surprising how many decisions that will impact your career are made when you're not in the room.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not even aware of all the ones that have been made for me, but I know that there are some. So you need those people who are there, who are comfortable, know enough about your work, and who are comfortable saying that, yes, you would be good for this position. Not everybody is going to be comfortable, and that's okay. You only really need like one or two people who are in those conversations to be your advocate. That's probably the word I'm working for. Someone who can advocate for you when those important conversations are happening, and who has enough pull and positioning to influence and convince people that you're the right one for the next opportunity that you want.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. I could not have explained any better. And I've been talking about leadership for such a long time. I've talked about mentorship and I've been talking about sponsorship and advocating. But gracefully put. Thank you. Thank you. So, okay. So before I send you on your way, Carolyn, because I tend to keep people on here as long as I possibly can. Before I send you on your way, one last question: do you consider yourself a leader, and why?
Mm. I do. And it's
Okay.
funny, throughout most of my career, I've been what I call an individual contributor, which means I haven't been a official manager for most of my career. I did have certain points in time where I did manage it directly, formally manage a teams of people. But throughout my entire career, I've had to lead um, project teams, just different groups of people across the organization. And that in itself presents its own challenges because you
Mhm.
don't have that formal authority. You're really relying on your ability to develop those relationships and get kind of convince very busy people to get things done on time and at a certain level of quality and such. And
Yeah.
so that's what I've been doing for the vast majority of my career. I mean, I'm fortunate in the role I am now that I work with a great group of people. Everybody's very passionate and focused
Mm.
and really adept at the work that they do. And that makes my leadership easy because everybody, it's really just a matter of directing everyone and coming to consensus eventually on which way we're going to move forward, and then we all move forward together. So yeah, and I think that's important. I consider myself a leader even if I don't have the official group of people reporting to me at this particular time. But really, anyone can be a leader at
Mhm.
any level of the organization, even if you're leading projects, even if you're someone who comes up with an idea and finds a way to get it implemented. That in itself is leadership, and that's really what we need more of in organizations and in the
Mhm.
world.
In everyday
Everywhere.
life. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. So, okay, well, what makes a good leader then?
Oh gosh. Again, it is tough to define,
Yeah,
as I
yeah.
found in my tool, but I think someone who, in terms of leadership, someone who is, has a strong idea of what the strategy and the end goal should be, and then
Mm.
is open enough to be able to coach and provide good feedback to people and inspire people towards that goal. So you kind of have to have the vision in mind of this is where we're
Mhm.
headed. You've got people underneath who you have to inspire them and help them see the vision and care about it the way that you do, and then understand what their strengths are and kind of to say turn them loose, but let them go, give them the agency and the authority to go forward and achieve those goals. And of course, you need to be there directing. That's the challenge is, letting people move forward, but you still as the leader have to have that, you're still kind of driving the bus, so to say. You know which direction we're going in. So you have to keep bringing people along, keep coaching them, keep giving them honest and timely feedback on what they're doing. And yeah, and then once you get to the end goal or even little milestones along the way, celebrate with people. I find a lot,
Mm.
I've been on plenty of project teams where we work on
Mhm.
multi-year strategies and everyone's just so exhausted by the end, and then we're on to the next thing and we barely had time to even reflect on what we did and how good it was or what we could learn from
Mhm.
it. Everyone's just on to the
Mhm.
next thing, but you need to take that time to celebrate your wins and see what we learned from what we did so we can apply it to the future.
Oh my goodness. For listeners out there, you can tell Carolyn's been at this for a while. Again, such an amazing response. Okay. Okay, I'll stop with the questions because I can continue. But Carolyn, is there anything that you would like in addition to add to anything on here, whether it's about leadership, your podcast? Please, it's an open floor for you. If you'd like to add anything.
Oh gosh. Well, yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you giving me the forum to talk
Thank you
about
for
leadership
coming.
on your podcast. It's a huge topic. And, if you ever want to do another session like this on another leadership
Definitely.
type topic, I'm absolutely open to
Oh, Carolyn,
to
you're
coming
on the
back to the
schedule
show.
already. You're coming
I'm
back.
going back. I'm coming back soon. That's great. But on the way out, I'll plug my podcast. So I
Yes.
actually have interviewed a ton of really great leaders and really dug into like what they learned about leadership and how they lead, whether they're creating their own companies or they're building their own careers within corporations. So yeah, so you can find all of my episodes at beyond6seconds.net. That's a number 6. And you can also find me on find the podcast on any podcast apps. If you're already a podcast listener, just open it up on wherever you find podcasts, search for Beyond 6 Seconds, and you can get all my episodes there.
If I wanted to say I was a listener and I thought I had a great story, would I be have the potential to submit maybe an inquiry to be like, can I be part of your podcast?
Yeah, you can on that same website, there is an application to be a guest. So you can find that there too and just fill that out and we'll go from there.
Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
amazing. Carolyn, thank you so much for taking the opportunity today on a Tuesday. Is it Tuesday? It's Monday. Is it Monday?
I don't even know what day it is anymore.
Oh
I
my
think
God.
is it Monday?
Okay.
It's Monday. Yeah,
It's
I forgot. I have no idea.
I don't know anymore. Thank you so much for taking the opportunity to talk to me tonight. Again, if you like to hear Carolyn's podcast, please go check her out. As I said here on this, if you're listening, you can tell she knows what she's talking about. So I just assume how amazing her interviews are. Carolyn, thank you again for taking the time to talk to me. If you like, really quick, just wave at my listeners because they actually thank you. All right, Carolyn, what did you think? What did you think about that episode? Here's what I think, and here's what I thought, and here's like after ending that conversation with her, then coming to the realization that this series is not over. This is the last episode of the last season for this year, but I'm bringing it back next year because I believe I was just talking about surface items and surface things, and Carolyn just brought so much to mind of, I don't know, just what's missing. And I want to dive deep into more of those conversations with Latina leaders themselves, and including people like Carolyn who are in the trenches of it all, who do see it, who do understand the back end course of things, the culture of things, the corporate space, the responsibility. There's just so much to it that I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoyed the season. I hope you enjoyed this year. I hope you enjoyed all the conversations and all the interviews that I did within the past year. And I'll see you next year. All right. With that, I'll see you next time.